We're here at the Odavi Centre with John Searl, who works for Statecraft with Chris Donnelly, who was a director of Statecraft, and again working in the community, letting people know what NATO really means. Certainly a few decades ago, people would have very easily, very quickly been able to identify the role and responsibility of NATO. And maybe much more recently with the comments made by President Trump, maybe NATO features a bit more in people's minds as well. However, it's not always necessarily true. And as sort of the Asian community in Britain, and particularly the Muslim community in Britain, John works in an area where the population is quite large, I suppose, with regards to the Asian community. And you were fortunate enough to take a few elder people from that community to NATO headquarters to find out a little bit more about NATO at that time. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Well, first of all, welcome to Radio Sangam.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Yes, we took a group of about a dozen senior members of the British Muslim community out to NATO headquarters in October last year for a couple of days for a series of presentations by senior members of the NATO staff at sort of ambassador level and senior, really to try and give a better understanding of why sort of NATO is important to all of the NATO members, all of the 29 countries, but Britain in particular, because we were a British group, and specifically within that to the Muslim community within Britain, kind of what the knock-on effects of NATO's role in the world and the effects of NATO activities are in the world, and why they're a positive thing for all of those cascades at different levels at sort of NATO, Britain and the Muslim community here.
And I suppose a lot of the conflict zones at this moment within the world are within areas where there's a heavy Muslim population, and NATO also has a significant role within those areas, not necessarily from a defensive or an offensive point of view, but from a peacekeeping point of view as well. Do you feel that people have been able to understand a bit better from their visit about the role that NATO plays around the world, its international role?
I hope so, and I think that it's very clear, looking at the way that NATO works, that whilst it is originally an alliance for defence and to balance the Soviet Union during the Cold War, as it has evolved forward in the course of the last, coming up to sort of 3 decades since the end of the Cold War, there is at least as much focus on stability and resilience within NATO membership and the 30-odd states outside of NATO who are partners with the alliance in one way or another, in terms of developing the stability that allows for everyday life to go on in the way that we all want it to, but also the resilience within a whole variety of nation states and across the globe, really, in terms of having that governance but having that societal stability to allow for life to go on and for people to live the lives that they want to lead.
Do you feel NATO still has a role to play within the world with regards to what's happened in the Eastern Bloc and the Soviet Union, albeit it has changed significantly? Has NATO's role itself changed over that period of time?
I think NATO has almost sort of not necessarily reinvented itself particularly, but the challenges which NATO face now are different and perhaps more multifaceted than they were in with rose-tinted glasses looking back at the Cold War sort of 50 and 60 years ago. It was a very binary situation. It was very
easy, wasn't it? It was black and white, and you knew where the line was, where the border was. And now with the advent of technology and cyber attacks and things like that, the boundaries have become blurred even further. And sometimes people refer to the hidden enemies amongst us, and it's very, very difficult to trace and find out what is really happening around you. Do you feel that the general public, with the work that yourselves and organisations similar to yourself have carried out, have got a better understanding and awareness of NATO? And if so, how does that understanding support those communities?
I hope so, but I think it's very much a work in progress, and I think there's a lot of work still to do. I think, again, if you look back to those lovely binary days of there's a single threat and here's a single defensive posture, it was relatively easy to go out and shout from the rooftops, this is what it's all about, and this is how the Western world, liberal democracy, if you like, this is the position that has been taken, and all of these different governments coming together with a shared aim. I think the rate of change in the world, the way that technology is accelerating so much faster than perhaps it has done in the recorded chunks of human history, mean that our children, my children certainly, are growing up in times that I wouldn't have recognised really from my own youth.
Well, I certainly remember a time when I had my first sort of computer built, and it had a 40 gig hard drive, and the person that built it said this would last you a lifetime. I mean, my phone has
It's twice that
in my pocket now. So information is key for people, and knowledge is key as well with regards to having that information and access to that information. Is there a risk that having access to the information is also causing problems?
I think the effective filter to that problem is education. And it's really very important that people, whether they happen to be 12 or 25 or 75, have the ability to be able to look at stuff which they are presented in terms of information, and just have a sensible method of looking at that and trying to work out where it's come from, what the perspective is of the person who's feeding them that information, in terms of what do people want me to think about this particular situation. I think there's dangers that, and I see it with my own children, I see it with the children that I teach, that the echo chamber piece becomes very, very loud. That if you're getting all of your information from a very restricted group of social media, where everyone who's feeding into that particular conversation is all of the same age and of the same background, it's very easy to drop pebbles in there, and the ripples,
see the ripples, yeah.
Absolutely become amplified, and it becomes very loud and very noisy very quickly with a single point of perspective. Whereas actually the world's not necessarily like that. But even if there are cases where the world is like that, what's most important is an understanding of where that particular noise is coming from to start with. Who is it who's feeding you that information? So that you can be sensible in the way that you interpret it. And I think education about that is really, really important, and part of what we're doing here today is part of that educational piece, letting people know that there are other perspectives than those that perhaps they might get if they just open Facebook or listen to what's happening on their Snapchat feed or whatever.
And do you not feel that the schools are carrying out that sort of role and responsibility even at key stage 2? IT and social media responsibility is slowly but surely becoming part of the curriculum as such, because you've got young children now hooked onto their mobile phones, to their tablets in particular. Do you not feel that there is a role for schools to do that, or do you feel that it's not enough and there needs to be additional layers above and beyond that? And of course not everybody's at school.
Of course not. I think that this is a situation which is so important that whatever levels that we can possibly use to... I'm trying to avoid the word influence, because what I mean is the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I don't want to be influencing people. What I want to be doing is giving people the facility to be able to avoid the influence, or at least be aware of the fact that that influence is there. And fantastic, if it's coming through the school curriculum, that's fantastic. If it can come through parents, if it can come through non-school-based educational processes such as the one that we're involved in here today, all the better. And the more that we can build on that, the more people are going to be able to make sensible and informed judgments about what it is that they're being told.
John Searl, thank you very much for your time tonight.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.